It all began with the quiet ache of loneliness. At 73, having lost my wife, Alina, 6 years prior, the silence in my home had become a heavy weight. I'd spent over 4 decades attending the same church, a place of comfort and community. Pastor Mitchell and his wife, Delphine, had become my pillars, a surrogate family who offered support when my own world felt adrift. Delphine, in particular, was a constant presence. She'd bring me casseroles, remind me about my medications, and even drive me to appointments when my arthritis flared up. I saw her as a beacon of selfless compassion, a true friend. My loneliness was a constant companion, so Delphine suggested I join the church's grief support group. She said it would help me process my sorrow and perhaps find new friends. I followed her advice, and every Tuesday evening, I'd descend into the church basement with a handful of other people who were navigating their own losses. It was in that group that I met Rosalind. She was 68, with silver hair and eyes that held a depth of kindness I hadn't seen in years. Her husband had passed from the same cancer that took Alina, so we had an immediate, profound understanding of one another's pain. Our friendship blossomed outside the support group. We'd meet for coffee, or she'd call just to check on me. For the first time since Elena's death, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't about replacing Elena, but about finding a new path forward, a companionship that honored her memory while allowing me to feel alive again. I confided in Delphine about my budding friendship with Rosalind. She smiled and said she was happy for me, that Elena would have wanted me to find happiness. But her eyes told a different story. Her smile didn't quite reach them. Something felt forced, unsettling. 2 weeks later, Rosalind stopped coming to the group. Delphine told me she just needed a break from the meetings and that I should give her space. My calls to Rosalind went unanswered, my messages unreturned. My heart sank. Had I moved too fast? Said the wrong thing? The following Tuesday, I arrived at the church early. I was waiting in the sanctuary when I heard voices coming from Pastor Mitchell's office. I recognized Delphine's voice, and then, a jolt of shock, Rosalind's. I couldn't help but move closer. Their hushed conversation was not what I'd expected from a grief counseling session. "You did exactly what I asked," Delphine was saying. "He was getting too attached." "I feel terrible about it," Rosalind replied. "He's such a sweet man. And the way he talks about his wife, he really loved her." Delphine's voice hardened. That's exactly the problem. He was starting to move on, to create new attachments. That's not healthy for someone his age. My blood ran cold. They were talking about me. Rosalind's voice was filled with a gentle protest. "But he seemed so happy. Isn't that what grief recovery is supposed to be about? Learning to live again?" "Rosalind, you don't understand," Delphine snapped. "I've been taking care of him since Elena died. I've been his support system. If he starts forming new relationships, where does that leave me? Who's going to need me then?" The silence that followed felt like a betrayal in itself. Then Delphine's words, cold and sharp, cut through the quiet. "I paid you to befriend him, to give him just enough hope to keep him engaged in the support group, but not enough to actually move forward. I needed him to stay dependent on me." "He's not just some charity case," Rosalind said quietly. "He's a human being with real feelings." "He's a lonely old man with a decent pension and no family to leave it to," Delphine said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Do you know how much money he's donated to this church? How much he's written in checks to help with my ministries? He's been our biggest contributor since Elena died." A physical sickness washed over me. Every kind word, every moment of connection with Rosalind had been a calculated lie. My hope, a cruel manipulation orchestrated by the woman I had trusted most. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. I needed proof. I needed to expose the full extent of their deceit. The next day I called Delphine, feigning a deep emotional struggle. I told her I was in a bad place and needed her support. She came over right away, eager to play the role of the compassionate caretaker. I had a small tape recorder hidden behind a book on my coffee table. the very same one Elena had used to record her thoughts. Now it would serve as an instrument of justice. I opened the conversation by expressing how lost I felt without Rosalind. I thought maybe we had something special, I said. I thought maybe Elena was sending me a sign that it was okay to love again. Delphine's response was a masterclass in cruelty. She told me that grief often made us see connections that weren't really there. You have to understand, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Some people are just naturally good at making others feel special. It doesn't mean they actually care about you. I pressed her further. I keep thinking about all the money I've given to the church. Sometimes I wonder if people just see me as a wallet with legs. That's when she made her fatal mistake. Don't be ridiculous, she laughed. Your generosity has been such a blessing to our ministry. Pastor Mitchell and I are so grateful for everything you've contributed, especially since Elena passed. Your faithfulness in giving has been exactly what we needed during some difficult financial times. She kept talking, revealing more with every word, digging her own grave. She mentioned specific donation amounts, detailing how she and the pastor had used my money for their personal expenses, all disguised as ministry costs. She even admitted to managing my grief to ensure I remained a reliable contributor. By the end of our conversation, I had everything I needed to expose her. That Sunday, I arrived at church early. I had already spoken with the sound technician, telling him I wanted to share some recordings of Elena's voice as a tribute. He helped me set up the equipment. The congregation was full. Pastor Mitchell began the service, and Delphine sat in her usual spot, smiling her practiced, perfect smile. When it was time for announcements, I stood up. I have something I'd like everyone to hear, I said, walking to the front. A confession that I think this congregation needs to understand. I pressed play. The first recording filled the sanctuary, Delphine's voice, clear as day, explaining how she'd paid Rosalind to manipulate me. The silence in the room was deafening. Then came the second recording, her voice admitting to using my donations for their personal gain, laughing about managing my grief for their financial benefit. I watched as the color drained from Delphine's face. She sat frozen, her mouth open, a silent gasp. Pastor Mitchell looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. This was the woman who had counseled their grief, who had taken their money in the name of God. People began to cry, others looked angry, a few got up and walked out. This is the woman who's been counseling your grief, I said to the congregation. This is the person you've trusted with your most vulnerable moments. This is who's been taking your money in the name of God. I turned and walked out of the sanctuary. I never looked back. The church voted to remove both Pastor Mitchell and Delphine. I was asked to stay and help rebuild, but I declined. Some betrayals cut too deep. I found Rosalind's number and called her. She answered, her voice laced with a raw sadness. I know what happened, I told her. I know what she made you do. Rosalind started to cry. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I needed the money for my medical bills, and she said it would help you process your grief. I never meant for it to go so far. I know, I said. She manipulated both of us. We talked for over an hour. Rosalind explained how Delphine had framed her actions as therapeutic, a role play to help me heal, and how she had threatened to expose her if she backed out. 3 months later, Rosalind and I met for coffee. It was a real meeting, with real hopes and real conversation. We're taking it slow, building something honest, something that honors our pasts while looking toward a future of genuine connection. I found a new church, one that is transparent about its finances and has real, trained grief counselors. People sometimes ask me if I regret exposing Delphine so publicly. I tell them that forgiveness doesn't mean enabling abuse. Grace doesn't mean staying silent when someone is hurting others. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is expose the truth, even when it's ugly. Delphine taught me that trust must be earned, that even those who claim to serve God can serve themselves instead. But she also taught me something else, that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about refusing to let that pain define you. At 73, I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely. My emotions were manipulated, my generosity exploited. But I'm still here, still hopeful, still capable of love, and that's something no one can ever take from me.